What's up, everyone? Welcome to Mistic Reacts, and today I am reacting to another Salmonella Academy video. Daniel Dancer, history's biggest cheapskate. Now, I am honestly a pretty big cheapskate. I'm not Mr. Krabs level cheapskate, but I am probably pretty close because I just don't have a lot to spare. Um, make sure to check out him below and check out my other videos reacting to him. There's a whole playlist. I keep everything organized in my playlist. And if you want to support me, check out my other channels or even my Patreon. And let's get into it.
My Skillshare. Hey kids, you're
Hello.
probably familiar with at least a few characters whose obsessive penny pinching truly knows no bounds. Yes, from Ebenezer Scrooge to Scrooge McDuck, nobody hoards money quite like misers. But these guys aren't the most miserly misers out there, not by a long shot. First of all, look at their top hats, their extravagant use of glasses, their luxurious chairs. These things are worth their weight in precious shekels. No true miser would waste their wealth on such frills. Second of all, these guys aren't real. They're fictional characters. Scrooge
Wow.
McDuck does not exist. I
Who
don't care what
knew?
CNN says, it's all liberal conspiracy bullshit. I mean, look at this article by the Huffington Post. You mean to tell me that this picture isn't photoshopped? Ridiculous. But you know who was real? One Daniel Dancer of London, England. Born in
Okay.
1716, Daniel's father died at a young age, leaving behind a
1716.
large agricultural estate for Daniel to
Ooh.
oversee. When it was first inherited, the property brought in a few £100s a year, which doesn't sound like much today, but given that a general laborer could be expected to make around £19 per year in 1710, it's safe to say that Dancer could afford to live a fairly lavish lifestyle
Yeah.
off his passive income alone. But Dan was like, you know, all this food and clothing and stuff is alright, but you know what I really like? Owning money. Say, how much does a pound cost? Well, that's a complicated question, Daniel. Can currency really be said to have intrinsic value? Some economists believe that. TLDR, please. They cost a pound. Jesus, that's a lot. I better start saving. Thus began one of the most intentionally frugal lifestyles history has ever seen. Let me walk you through a few of Dancer's day-to-day habits.
Okay.
First of all, soap, don't even think about it. The closest thing to bathing that Daniel did was during the summer months when, once or twice a week, he'd wade into the nearby pond and scrub his face with a handful of sand. Say what you will, but what he lacked in deodorization, he certainly made up for in exfoliation. Admittedly, all of London probably reeked to high hell back then,
Yeah.
so while Daniel's smell might not have tipped people off to his eccentricity, his clothes almost certainly did. On a good day, he'd be seen in one of his coats, which were homemade patchwork abominations of various garments that Dancer found on the streets and local dust heaps, looking like a walking dementia patient sewing circle.
He would
Similarly,
do
all
good,
his shoes
so
were either
good in
scavenged or
today's
Frankensteined
fashion.
out of other pairs of shoes he already owned, with the whole ensemble being barely held together with haphazardly tied bands made of the hay grown on his estate. In
He
fact, a
would
lot
do
of the
so
time, he
good
ditched
today
normal clothes
in today's
altogether and just
fashion.
wear the hay. To his
Ooh.
credit, in his youth, Daniel was known to purchase a whole 2 shirts per year as his clothing expense. But one day he looked in the mirror and said, Daniel, you're bleeding funds like a stuck pig. It's time to grow up and get your act together. And cut his budget to only 1 shirt per year. One of the few people that Daniel associated with regularly was his sister, whom he lived with. Believe it or not, she shared in a lot of Daniel's tight-fisted habits, and it definitely showed. She was described as, quote,
Were
having more the
they
appearance of a walking
together?
dunghill than one of the fair sex. Couldn't
What?
have said it better myself, honestly. Dancer prepared all of his food for the upcoming week ahead of time, consisting of only 14 hard dumplings and 3 pounds of beef stretched out over the entire 7-day period. Every day, he'd eat only a single meal that was basically equivalent to 2 wads of dried out dough and 1.5 quarter-pounder patties from McDonald's. He kept this habit up for years without fail, except for one time when he stumbled upon a fully intact, rotting sheep carcass during his daily stroll. He was like, "Good
Please
lord, this
don't
is just
eat it.
obscene. Who would leave a perfectly good pile of arguably edible meat and organs just sitting around like this?" So he dragged the thing home and made him and his sister a nice big pile of spoiled mutton pies, which they subsisted off of for several weeks. That's a real life hack right there. Who needs refrigeration if it's already rancid, am I right? Despite Daniel's rabid fear of any unnecessary spending, he did own a dog named Bob that he was quite fond of. At this point, I'm almost certain that Dancer just decided to base his entire life off of linoleum by no effects, which is pretty incredible considering linoleum wasn't even invented for another 100 years. Anyway though, one day, Daniel's neighbor came to complain about how Bob had been harassing his sheep. So Daniel said, "Don't worry boy, I ain't gonna kill you, but we don't want a lawsuit on our hands, do we?" "No we don't. What would we do if a lawyer
Do they
came
have
around here, huh?"
lawsuits?
That's right, and make his children watch, yeah. So he decided to take the dog to the local farrier, which is basically a blacksmith that specializes in horseshoes and the like. "Hey, could you make my dog, like, not have teeth anymore?" What kind of business you think I'm running here, boy? Come on, man, you file down horses' hooves for a living. Teeth are just tiny mouth hooves. That's close. Sorry, buddy, but close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades.
How is he gonna eat?
Well, got me there. Say, what's a hand grenade? None of my sources say what happened to the dog after his untimely nubbening, but I do know Dan never got sued, so I guess the operation was a success. Daniel's sister passed away in 1766, leaving him so distraught that he actually went out of his way to buy mourning clothes for her funeral. And by that I mean he bought a pair of secondhand black stockings, and that's it. Still, that's a big deal when it comes to the likes of Dancer. At this point, the only person close to a friend that Dancer had was a woman known as Lady Tempest. She was so influential over him that she was actually able to convince him to buy, get this, a 1 shilling hat. This was quite an accomplishment, as Daniel's last hat was older than half of you at 14 years old.
What? I'm not. You don't.
Meow.
19.
You. Of course, the next time Lady Tempest went to hang out with him, he was still wearing his old disgusting hat. When questioned about the one he bought, he goes, "Oh yeah, that frilly old thing. Sold it for a 6 pence profit. Super easy too. I tell you, forget house flipping. Hat flipping is going to be the cool new thing pretty soon." Lo and behold, 250 years later, he was wrong. Daniel died at the ripe old age of 78, which seems pretty shocking considering the whole not using soap, eating rotten
And
food thing, but I guess his
19,
near total isolation from
whatever.
other people made up for that
17,
when it came
whatever.
to preventing illness, though he never ended up shelling out any of the massive hoard of wealth that he accumulated over this time.
What
His
happened to
efforts
it?
weren't completely in vain. By the time he passed away, Daniel's estate was now pulling in about £3,000 in yearly net revenue, 10 times the amount it earned when he first inherited it.
Hell
So,
yeah.
moral of the story, parsimony has its place. While it's good to save money, don't torture yourself just for the sake of a few bucks.
Yeah.
Next time your parent or significant other insists on turning down the thermostat or keeping the windows up to save gas, just say, "Hey, are we human or are we Dancer?" But you know what else is more valuable than money?
Knowledge.
That's why you need to try
Knowledge.
Skillshare.com. Skillshare is an online learning community
I
with over
don't
23,000 classes
think
in technology,
this is
design, business,
active,
and more. Slash
But
Sam.
you know, there you go. I'm a little bit late by 6 years, but hope you enjoyed. If you want to see me react to more of his videos, I have a playlist or any other channels. Let me know. And at least most of us aren't as cheap as Daniel Dancer. I hope. I hope everyone bathes and buys at least one new shirt a year. Until next time, bye bye.